Let's get this out of the way. Jerry McGuire is not a theological masterpiece. However, it does contain one of the greatest marriage lessons ever shoved into a morally questionable movie. Yeah, I said it. You know the line, help me, help you. Everyone quotes it, no one actually understands it, but your marriage really needs it. Now, before anyone panics, I'm not about to tell you to base your marriage on Hollywood. I'm saying Hollywood accidentally tripped over a truth that therapists have been shouting for decades. While we are all responsible for our own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, because we are communal beings and our nervous systems affect one another, there's a lot we can do to help our spouse show up for us when we need it the most. It's not complicated, it's just uncomfortable, which, to be clear, is the entire theme of adulting. So here's the deal. You have your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and your spouse has theirs. Fine. We've all learned that in Psych 101 or, if you've been watching the Catholic Counseling Institute. But you're also wired together like two nervous systems holding hands, which means if you hurl your feelings at them like emotional dodgeballs, they are not going to catch the message. They're going to duck. What I'm going to teach you today is one shift that stops your spouse from shutting down and actually gets them to respond. Help me, help you, but not in the cheesy movie way. It's this is how your brain is built. So buckle up, because we're about to drag your marriage out of the emotional escape room you've both been trapped in. Let's actually talk about this line, because when Jerry McGuire said, help me, help you, he wasn't offering relationship wisdom. He was exhausted and stressed and one small inconvenience away from spontaneously combusting. But honestly, that's exactly why it works as a metaphor. We all hit that point in our marriages. You're trying to say what you need, but you're also trying not to start World War III. But something about the way it comes out turns your spouse into a hedgehog. Spiky, defensive, and emotionally unavailable. And the problem isn't that you're dramatic or needy or bad at communication. The problem is that your nervous system and your spouse's nervous system are basically reading each other's emotional mail in real time. You know how sometimes you ask your spouse a completely normal question and they respond like you just accused them of treason? Yeah, that's not personality. It's physiology. When you're upset and you think you're being clear, what really happens is this chain reaction. Your body gets tense, your voice edges up, your timing is, let's say, poor, and your spouse's brain gets the message. Danger approaching, prepare counterattack. No one wakes up thinking, today I will purposefully misinterpret everything. That's just what dysregulated nervous systems do. It's like their love language or something. And that's where the help me, help you idea becomes useful. Not the cinematic version where someone whispers it in dramatic lighting, but the real life version where one spouse is basically saying, I'm trying here. I need to show you what's happening inside of me without triggering the smoke alarm in your brain, also called the amygdala. Emotion-focused therapy has been studying this dynamic for decades. We know that when one partner shares the vulnerable experience, not the accusation, not the analysis, just the actual feeling, the other partner's threat response quiets down. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently enough that research calls it predictable, which is comforting in its own way. And I'm saying this as someone who's seen dozens of Catholic couples who love each other deeply but accidentally communicate like two people passing each other in a foggy parking. When couples struggle to communicate, it's almost never because they don't care or they don't want to get something right. It's usually because the thing they meant to say got buried under how fast everything happened. You felt something. It hit you sideways. You opened your mouth and what came out didn't exactly showcase your best self. The funny thing is, most people genuinely think that they're expressing the real issue. But what usually shows up in the conversation is the armed version, the quick defensive phrasing designed to protect you from feeling exposed. And once that protective layer takes over, your spouse ends up reacting to the tone, not the truth underneath. Armor is great for battle, not so great for marriage. When I talk about the vulnerable ask, I'm not talking about dramatic confessions or emotional poetry. I'm talking about saying the thing you were actually trying to say before your nervous system hit the panic button. It's the moment where you shift from explaining, arguing, or lecturing into simply naming your experience or your emotion. And yes, I know it feels a little exposed. It feels a little like you're handing over someone your emotional passport and hoping they don't judge your photo. They always judge the passport photo. This kind of simplicity tends to work because your spouse finally knows what's actually going on, instead of trying to decode the emotional version of hieroglyphics. People respond to clarity. Even kind people, especially kind people, need clarity. The whole "if they loved me, they would know" idea has never done a single marriage any favors. Love makes people willing, not psychic. And honestly, it's a terrible message from Disney. So the practice here isn't complicated. The next time something stings, just pause long enough to notice what the real feeling is before your armor snaps on. You don't have to polish it or rehearse it. If it comes out a little wobbly, that's fine. Vulnerability isn't graded, and nobody's getting extra credit. When you say the honest thing, the actual inside thing, your spouse finally has a fair shot at showing up for you, because now they can see the pain and the emotion behind your words, instead of getting locked in a defensive structure that you may have unintentionally triggered by using words that blame instead of words that describe. And that's usually the moment where the whole tone of the conversation shifts, because you let them meet you in the place that's real and vulnerable. When a conversation starts sliding towards that familiar cliff, most couples try to fix it by talking faster, explaining harder, or repeating themselves with just a little more intensity. And of course, that never works, because once your body tips into that elevated, flooded place, the part of your brain that handles nuance packs a tiny suitcase and quietly leaves the building. The Gottmans call this physiological flooding, but honestly, you don't need the research term to recognize it. You feel that heat crawl in your chest, your jaw tightens, you're already forming counter arguments before your spouse even finishes their sentence, and suddenly the entire conversation is held together by duct tape, and we all know how long duct tape holds in an argument. The co-regulation break is the moment where you stop pretending that you're still calm and admit what your body already knows. It's not a dramatic exit or a power move. It's just giving both of your nervous systems a chance to settle, so the conversation doesn't turn into a referendum on who ruined the evening. A line that usually works well sounds something like you'd actually say in real life, not in a communication workshop. Something like, "I want to say this in a way that actually gets us somewhere, and I can feel myself getting too amped up. Give me just a minute so I can recenter and come back as a better version of myself." That's it. No poetry required. What makes this surprisingly effective is that it shifts the dynamic from escalation to intention, an invitation. Instead of pushing through the tension, which guarantees no one gets what they actually want, you're signaling that the relationship matters more to you than winning this argument. The message is, "I care about this. I care about us, and I want to get this right. I don't want to be right. And also, I'm trying not to say something I'll regret." And here's the part most couples overlook. During that short pause, you're not storming off, you're not ruminating, you're not continuing the conversation in your head, and you're not drafting closing arguments for round 2. You're letting your nervous system reset enough that you can return to this conversation with a level head and an actual capacity to listen, not just to react. Taking this moment is not abandonment, it's not rejection, it's not a sign that the marriage is fragile. It's simply acknowledging that you're human, and humans don't argue well when their internal alarms are blaring. When you come back regulated, the whole tone of the conversation shifts, because now you can actually respond to one another instead of wrestling with each other's adrenaline. Adrenaline is terrible at marriage. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like in the flow of a normal week, because it's one thing to nod along while everything is quiet, and another thing entirely to remember any of this when the dishes are piling up, someone forgot a commitment, and the tone in the room shifts 3 degrees to the left. The goal here isn't to transform your marriage overnight. Honestly, nobody does that. What you're aiming for here is small shifts, tiny adjustments in how you both approach moments that used to go off the rails. It's like changing the way you hold the steering wheel. The movement is minimal, but the direction changes anyways. And nobody needs a dramatic U-turn. One simple practice I give couples is to choose one moment each day. Any moment where you feel a flicker of irritation, disappointment, or confusion, and try to pair that with a single breath, a single sentence of internal honesty that focuses on your emotion. You don't have to voice it out loud yet, though you can. The point is that you begin noticing the feeling before it gets dressed up as something sharper. Share your feelings, not the blame. Maybe this pause gives you just enough space to realize that you're actually tired, or hungry, or lonely, not angry. Maybe it helps you recognize that you feel brushed off and your brain translated that into annoyance because it felt safer than saying that you were hurt and lonely. Maybe it just keeps you from firing off a remark that would have created a whole evening that neither one of you want. We have all had those evenings. A little bit of emotional honesty with yourself makes the vulnerable ask and the co-regulation break so much easier because you're no longer trying to navigate a conversation on top of confusion about what you're even feeling. You're giving yourself a head start and your spouse the benefit they didn't even realize that they needed. Once this daily pause becomes familiar, start bringing just one of these skills into real conversation. Not all of them at once, not in a perfectly choreographed sequence, just once. Maybe you try naming a real feeling instead of a reaction or a blame. Maybe you ask for a minute to regroup. Maybe you check in with your spouse and say, hey, do you have the emotional bandwidth right now for this? And then actually trust their answer. It works better if you trust their answer. These aren't big dramatic interventions. They're not meant to feel impressive. They're just meant to feel. It's doable, sustainable, like something you could actually see yourself using on a Tuesday afternoon without needing to pause the entire household and call a family meeting. The cumulative effect of these small shifts is that your marriage slowly becomes a place where these conversations don't feel like traps. Pauses don't feel like rejections, and emotions don't erupt out of nowhere. You start to understand each other's signals sooner, respond with a little more steadiness, and argue with a sense of partnership instead of opposition. You help your spouse help you. When couples first learn new communication tools, there's always this period, usually the first week or two, where the tools get misused in the most sincere and disastrous ways. It's like handing someone a precision instrument and watching them use it as a hammer. They mean well, but things break. One of the biggest pitfalls is treating a vulnerable ask like a magical sentence that guarantees a certain response. I've seen people deliver the line perfectly with composure and sincerity and then stare at their spouse like a customer waiting on a late Amazon package. Packages don't arrive faster if you glare at the tracking number. I've tried it. The heart of the vulnerable ask isn't the words, it's the openness behind them. If your spouse needs a moment to process or they look a little confused at first, it's not a failure. That's just their brain catching up. You're teaching it something new, and honestly, most of us are not used to hearing clear emotional messages without the usual defensive static. Another common misstep happens with the co-regulation break. Instead of using it to reset, some people use it as a fancy exit strategy, the emotional equivalent of dropping the mic and walking out. That's not a pause, that's avoidance with better branding. And branding only works for companies, not conflict. The difference is intention. A real co-regulation break has a return built into it. You don't disappear. You don't go reorganize the closet or scroll your phone for an hour. You just step away long enough to come back grounded. If the break becomes a hiding place, the conversation loses its shape and your spouse is left standing there wondering if the whole thing is about to evaporate. The third pitfall, and this one sneaks up on people, is using these tools only when you're upset. They work better and feel more natural when you've practiced them during calmer moments too. It's kind of like stretching. If the only time you stretch is when you're already injured, you're going to make the injury worse. And no one needs a pulled emotional hamstring. There's also the perfectionistic trap. Couples will try one of these skills once, it feels awkward or lands weird, and they immediately decide it's not for them. But anything new feels weird at first. Think about the first time you held a baby and didn't know where to put your hands, or the first time that you tried to pray in silence and your brain spilled a full highlight reel of grocery list and random memories from 7th grade. Finally, and this is a big one, don't weaponize the language. I've seen people say things like, I'm being vulnerable, so you need to respond kindly, or I'm asking for a break, so you can't be upset. That kind of framing turns communication into a rule book, and marriages don't thrive on rule books. They strive on generosity and repair. If you hear yourself sounding like a referee, take a breath. If you steer clear of these traps, the tools stay what they're meant to be. Ways to connect, not ways to corner each other. And that's the whole point. Not performing communication, but building safety. When you strip everything down, the psychology, the communication models, the nervous system responses, the heart of this whole thing is actually much simpler than it sounds. Every couple at some point ends up trying to ask for connection in a way that accidentally creates distance. And every partner at some point ends up reacting to the tone instead of the emotion underneath it. That's not a failure. It's just what it means to be human. What Help Me Help You captures unintentionally but beautifully is that relationships are built on mutual influence. You shape each other, you respond to each other, you co-regulate without even realizing that you're doing it. When one of you softens, the other one often softens too. When one of you pauses, the conversation shifts just enough to keep it from falling apart. It's not magic, it's biology and a little bit of kindness. Using these tools is really about creating just enough space for your spouse to meet you instead of brace against you. It's about giving each other something you can actually work with, a feeling that's named instead of hidden behind an attack or protest, a momentary break instead of a shutdown, an honest request instead of an argument waiting to happen. And here's what I want you to remember. You don't need to say it all perfectly. You don't need to hit the right tone every single time. You don't even need to love vulnerability. I certainly don't. You just need to be willing to try, and willing to try again when it feels awkward or uncertain. Most of the healing in a marriage doesn't happen in grand gestures anyways. It happens in those quieter, slightly uncomfortable adjustments that slowly reteach your nervous system that you're safe with each other. And that is more than enough. So as you take this into your week, think of that scene. Not because it's profound, but because it's relatable. Two people, frustrated, tired, trying to reach each other but missing the mark, and one of them saying essentially, "Work with me, I'm trying." That's the spirit of it, not the line itself, but the intention behind it. If you can bring even a little of that intention into your next difficult moment, the pause, the truth, the reset, you'll be amazed at how differently those conversations unfold. Not perfectly or instantly, but different enough that you start feeling a shift. And hey, if all else fails, take a break, grab a snack, and come back hydrated. It's harder to fight with a full belly and enough water. When you strip everything down, the psychology, the communication models, the nervous system responses, the heart of this whole thing is actually much simpler than it sounds. And no matter what, remember, there will always be a place for you on the Catholic couch.